Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film Skyfall. Now, Skyfall is the 23rd film in the James Bond film franchise. James Bond, played by Daniel Craig, is trying to defeat Javier Bardem's Raul Silva, who is trying to humiliate and destroy MI6, and particularly hunt down and destroy M, played by Judi Dench. The thing about the James Bond film franchise is it's been very protected for a very long time, and in some ways that's a good thing and probably why the franchise has lived on. It's been controlled by the Broccoli family. Cubby Broccoli did it before, and now Barbara Broccoli, his daughter, and his stepson Michael G. Wilson produce it now, and they've never let named directors do it. Spielberg wanted to do one and they didn't let him, so he made Indiana Jones. Tarantino wanted to do a Casino Royale with Pierce Brosnan. They wouldn't let him because they wouldn't relinquish that kind of control. They don't like famous, big name, big star directors. And it was kind of surprising that they went with Sam Mendes with this film. But I think that was really a breath of fresh air and a really smart move to finally let kind of a bigger star director come in and do something with James Bond. I like a lot of the James Bond films, and I think they've made some really great films with lesser known directors and directors that won't really put up that much of a fight against the Broccoli family. The thing I've always liked about Sam Mendes as a director is he lets his cinematographer play. In his first two films, American Beauty and Road to Perdition, he worked with the great Conrad Hall, and those films are simply beautiful. I always heard a rumor, and I don't know if it's true or not, how Sam Mendes would work is he works with the actors and he lets the DP pick out all the shots. I don't know if that's true or not, but it definitely looks that way. And then when he let Roger Deakins become his cinematographer, he's been mainly a cinematographer since Conrad Hall died. When you really let a cinematographer go out and show what he can really do, like Deakins, it's an amazing thing to watch. I saw this at the IMAX in Lincoln Square, which is an amazing IMAX. I love to sit really close. And in the previous two, like Quantum of Solace, Casino Royale, they're trying to do a little more of a Bourne influence thing, do more of a shaky cam thing some of the time. Not all the time, but some of the time. And the amazing thing with the framing and the way Deakins shoots it, I could sit right in the front in this beautiful, amazing screen. I felt like I can see everything that's going on. It's so perfectly framed out. It's so perfectly shot. It's amazingly well lit. I love how he uses the lighting on the actors' faces in this film. I always notice in the other Bond films, all the lighting on their faces is perfect. You know, it's like perfect, pristine, big budget movie lighting. And the way he has a whole fight where you just see silhouettes. The scenes that take place in Shanghai and the beautiful, amazing lighting that's going around in the background and playing off these actors' bodies and faces. This is probably, and might be, the best shot Bond movie I've ever seen. He is probably the greatest cinematographer working today. It's probably one of the best shot blockbusters I've seen in years. It's just the way they shot it added this kind of extra essence to it and added this extra beauty to it. This is really kind of more of a traditional Bond film than we've been used to with Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig has kind of been the exception to the rule of Bond, that usually everything's worked out and formatted really like Goldfinger, and this is more of that tradition, which I kind of like. I think people are getting a little sick of the anti-Bond format that we're doing for a little while, especially in something like Quantum of Solace. As much fun as it was to break the James Bond mold, it's also cool sometimes to see a James Bond movie and just see a great James Bond film. And this is really what that was. It's very traditional in what it's trying to do. I mean, Q's back, you have a few more gadgets, you have all these different locales. It doesn't feel like it's trying to do anything that different, but at the same time, James Bond has always been a very adaptable franchise. And this is really kind of the Dark Knight James Bond movie. Even Javier Bardem dressing up as a police officer, just like the Joker did. I think Javier Bardem is a lot like what the Joker was in The Dark Knight, whereas the Joker is kind of the opposite of Batman. Javier Bardem is the opposite of James Bond. In this film, they're like sons of M, and M and the whole MI6 gang has a much bigger role than it did in the previous Daniel Craig films. I don't think M's ever really had as big of a role as Judi Dench's M has had in this film. I mean, certainly Judi Dench has kind of always had a bigger presence than a lot of the actors who played M, particularly in this film, and she's very important to the plot. This also, like The Dark Knight, mixes kind of politics and action. I think The Dark Knight was heavier more on the politics than this film certainly is. This film's mainly concerned with action and showing you a fun fantasy Bond film. There's kind of an inquiry going into MI6 after Javier Bardem blows up part of MI6, but at the same time, it's still a Bond film. It's not trying to be The Dark Knight too much, but you can tell that influence is in there, especially how Javier Bardem is a very different Bond villain. He doesn't really want to take over the world. I mean, that's kind of the main Bond villain thing, is they want to take over the world, even if it's for like a dumb, stupid, crazy reason. And in this, he's really out to humiliate MI6, in particular M, who really failed him and screwed up his life, looking at Bond as kind of the newer version of him, because he was kind of her favorite before, and now he hates, M's new favorite. And that dichotomy is interesting, and it's an interesting way to do a Bond movie, but still frame it in the traditional structure and format that we're used to of Bond. And I like how when Daniel Craig started, and this whole run of Daniel Craig Bond films started, they're trying to do something different. And as much as this is a traditional Bond, they're really doing something different. It's a cool villain because he's very vengeful, but he still feels like a Bond villain. He's still super evil and has an amazing presence and has a ton of henchmen. He is exactly like a Bond villain. It's scarier because you feel like he could actually do it, whereas these other guys are almost like kind of a little cartoonish. It's a little silly to take over the world at the end, but Bond's always been a tad silly. I love Daniel Craig as Bond. Daniel Craig, I love his determination. He's always been the Bond like that scene in Casino Royale where Eva Green is crying in the shower and he gets in the shower with her after, he kills that guy. He's, always been the brooding Bond. Was a little more emotional, really believed in something. I think it fits him very well as an actor. It was cool to see Daniel Craig do kind of the more traditional route and pull it off very well. Now he has two great classic Bond films, this and Casino Royale, and I definitely say this is probably in my top 10 Bond films of all time. There's something to be said about just a fun Bond movie in that canon and in that format. And it has everything that a traditional Bond movie has. It has a great villain, it has a memorable theme song, it has a great cold open. It's everything that you really want is here. And I like seeing Q played by Ben Winshaw. I also like seeing Albert Finney, who I'm sure most of you probably miss, but I love Albert Finney. Albert Finney's a great actor. Bond has never been a deep, serious film, although I like it when they're a little more serious than silly. It's always like a silly kind of big blockbuster movie, but it's always great when, as a film fan and a fan of all these films, and I've seen all the Bond films, is just to see a really great at being Bond and really great at doing its own era. And I think this is one of the better blockbusters that Hollywood's produced this year, and maybe the best blockbuster Hollywood's produced this year. I definitely like this a lot more than The Avengers, and I think it's a better made film than that. Sam Mendes approached this in a really great way with an amazing cinematographer. It's one of the best Bond films, and definitely, I think, also one of the better made blockbusters of our current era. So if you have seen Skyfall and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to. And don't go away just yet. I'm actually going to tell you what I think are the 10 best Bond films. I'm not going to put them in the order, but I will just tell you what they are. But first, I did do, since this is Daniel Craig's third Bond film, I reviewed the other Bond actors who have gotten to a third Bond film in their run. And I'll put those annotations up now, and I'll put them at the end of the video. But I did a review of Goldfinger, The Spy Who Loved Me, and The World Is Not Enough, which are all Sean Connery, Roger Moore, and Pierce Brosnan's third Bond film. A couple years ago, I went on a kick of just seeing all the Bond films, and what I really think are kind of the best Bond films, and I'll go by actor. Connery has the most in terms of what I consider the best, and those are his first three and the first three Bond films ever made. That's Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger are absolute classics. And if you haven't seen those, you really don't understand Bond at all. George Lazenby's On Her Majesty's Secret Service is an absolute classic. It's really underrated for a long time. Roger Moore had two really great Bond films, and The Spy Who Loved Me, which I recently watched and reviewed, I really like, and For Your Eyes Only. He made a lot of stinkers in there, but he did manage to make two great Bond films. Timothy Dalton, The Living Daylights, and Pierce Brosnan with Goldeneye. And then, Daniel Craig, I would put Casino Royale, and I would definitely put Skyfall as one of the 10 best Bond films ever made. All the Bond actors at least made one good Bond movie. As much as I like Connery, and I might like Pierce Brosnan on this day, or Dalton, or whoever, all of them have brought something good to the role, at least left you with one memorable movie. But also check out those third Bond film reviews. Those annotations will be up, and